thank you to the realistic free-to-play online game War Thunder for sponsoring this simple history episode. PIAT, anti-tank weapon. PIAT stood for Projector, Infantry, Anti-Tank and was the main British anti-tank weapon of World War II. British soldiers were equipped with the Boy's anti-tank rifle. Even during the early stages of the war, the Boy's rifle, as well as other anti-tank rifles, were considered obsolete. It had insufficient power to penetrate the average tank armor, so it was clear that it had to be replaced with a more powerful weapon. The idea of the first British portable anti-tank weapon was brought up by Lieutenant Colonel Stuart Blacker. His Blacker Bombard was actually a spigot-mortar modified for an anti-tank role. The weapon could launch high-explosive bombs. Its later portable version, known as the Baby Bombard, was used as a model for the Piatt. Blacker's design was improved by Major Millis Jefferies, who was in charge of the Special Weapons Development Organization, called Ministry of Defense 1, or simply MD1. This unit was responsible for creating a number of secret weapons for the British Army during the war. Because of its nature, the organization was also known as Churchill's Toy Shop. Major Jefferies adopted the Bombard to be carried and operated by one soldier. The weapon bypassed standard tests and trials as it was of greatest importance to put it in action as soon as it was possible. Production of Piatts began in August 1942. A strange thing for the weapon was that at the beginning, the main manufacturer was the Imperial Chemical Industries Limited, which was not an ordnance company. The Piatt resembled a heavy tube made of sheets of steel and was a 39 inches or 0.99 meters long and weighed 32 pounds or 15 kilos. The tube housed a spigot mechanism and a firing spring. There was also a trigger mechanism attached and a monopod. The rear end of the weapon had padding to rest the shoulder. The front end was made in a shape of a trough, with a movable spigot rod on which a projectile was placed. The Piatt launched high-explosive anti-tank projectiles with a shaped charge. This novel charge allowed Piatt projectiles to penetrate through 4 inches of armor. Its projectile tail was made in the shape of a hollow tube, into which a propellant charge was inserted. Piatt projectiles were effective against all tanks at distances of 115 yards or 105 meters. The entire operation of the Piatt was very simple. When the trigger was pulled, the spigot rod was pushed by the spring through the hollow projectile tail, which ignited the propellant charge. The propellant explosion launched the projectile and pushed the spigot back against the spring and cocked the weapon for the next firing. So it was only before the first launch that the Piatt had to be cocked manually. The Piatt's simple design and spigot-mortar system gave it an advantage over rocket launchers such as the Bazooka and Panzerfaust. Since it didn't require a complex rocket mechanism, it was very easy to make, and more importantly, it was very cheap. From August 1942 until the end of the war, the Imperial Chemical Industries and other manufacturers produced around 115,000 weapons. Another advantage the Piatt had was its ability to launch high-explosive grenades and smoke grenades. Also, since it used a spigot-mortar system, there was no backblast, which allowed the Piatt to be used from buildings and other confined spaces. This was impossible to do with rocket launchers without harming everyone inside the room. Despite these advantages, the Piatt was quite unpopular among British and Commonwealth soldiers because of its many disadvantages. The first one was that it was large and unwieldy and therefore difficult to carry around. Another, more important drawback was the difficult and awkward process of the Piatt's initial cocking. To do it, the weapon had to be put vertically, with the soldier's feet standing on the shoulder padding. The tube was then turned to unlock and pulled upwards to load the spring and to attach it to the trigger mechanism. Once the spring was attached, the tube was pulled down again and turned back to lock. Not only was this entire operation complicated, it was especially difficult for short soldiers, not to mention that it was almost impossible to complete when in prone position. The Piatt also had a fairly big recoil, which very often caused injuries to its users, and also had issues with round reliability, which would mean that the whole cocking process would have to be done again in battle. Popular or not, the Piatt was widely used after it entered service in mid-1943. It was first used by Canadian troops during the Operation Husky, the Allied invasion of Sicily from July to August 1943. In the British Army, it was used by infantry on a platoon level. It was also used by Royal Marine Commandos, and even as an auxiliary weapon by some light-armoured vehicle groups. the British deployed the weapon in other armies and resistant movements in occupied Europe. The Piatt was used by Red Army and Free French troops, and also by Greek, Polish, and Yugoslav resistance fighters. After the war ended, the need for the Piatt was reduced. It was gradually withdrawn from service until the early 1950s, when it was replaced in the British Army by the American M20 Super Bazooka. Commands something with a little more firepower than the Piatt in War Thunder. War Thunder is a free-to-play military online game available on PC, PlayStation 4 and Xbox One, so simply download and start playing. We play it on PC every now and then as the username Simple History. The game has a choice of over 1,000 realistic aircraft, tanks and ships, which you can use to fight in epic battles with tens of thousands of players from all over the world. Use the link in the description below to register and get a free premium tank or aircraft and 3 days of premium account time as a bonus.